Can you trust your own memory? Most of us think we can, especially something that was a very powerful emotional moment. We think, I remember exactly what happened when 9/11 happened or when a certain war broke out. But the truth is, multiple studies, almost all of them, that found that our actual recollection of events is really about half. Now, that has some disturbing connotations when it comes to witnesses on a trial. But even for our own personal experience, when we're trying to remember something powerful, important to us, to know that our brain might be giving us incorrect information, and particularly where emotion is involved. And in the book of Devarim, in many ways, that is what Moshe is doing. He is remembering and recollecting emotional, powerful moments. And it's possible that maybe he doesn't remember them perfectly. Now, I want to make a very important statement here. The fact that the book of Devarim is approved, that's even though it's the words of Moshe, it's approved by God. So any connotations for theology or for law, God clearly accepts the words of Moshe. But there are certain hints that maybe there was something missing or wrong in Moshe's recollection. And that leads us to an interesting question on one small little detail that most people would look over, but it drives the rabbis wild, drives them crazy, which is when Moshe is recollecting the sin of the golden calf, he remembers the moment that he came down Har Sinai and he smashes the tablets, the luchot, the 10 commandments, the Aseret Hadibrot, the 10 utterances. Now that moment is emotional, not just for Moshe, but for the people, and it's powerful and important for God, and it's powerful and important for us today. So it's a moment you would think he would remember with perfect accuracy. Yet when we read the words of Moshe, the way he describes it, he says, Va'etpos b'shnei haluchot, and he took a hold of the 2 tablets, ve'ashlichem me'al shtei yadai, and I threw them from my hands, ve'ashberam le'nechem, and I smashed them before your eyes, speaking to the Israelites as he is right now. Now, there's no issue just in that. So he took the luchot, he took the tablets, and he smashed them, except just one verse earlier, it already said, or 2 verses earlier, it said, Ushne luchot habrit al shtei yadai. That when Moshe came down, he was saying, I was holding, the 2 luchot were on my hands, and then he saw the sin of the golden calf, felt that anger, and then he took them and smashed them. But how can you take something, how can you grab something with your hand if you're already holding it? And what we're going to see is that simple little question, that inconsistency, whether or not Moshe misunderstood it or we misunderstand it, which is always a possibility, there's something very powerful we can learn from it. So what we're going to do is look at a couple different answers that the rabbis have done. So the first one we're going to look is Rashbam, who's the grandson of Rashi. And Rashbam is being famous because he usually takes these simple reading, not literal, but the simple reading. So we're not going to go into midrash, we're not going to do any creative gymnastics. What is the text really saying to us? And what Rashbam imagines is that Moshe was so emotionally overcome, but he didn't want to smash the tablets, which is not consistent with the way that we've heard the story. He didn't want to smash them in anger. He was just shaken up, literally, and the tablets started to fall. And if he had done nothing, they would have fallen and crushed his feet because he wasn't wearing steel-toed boots. They didn't have them. So what he did is he sort of leaned forward and sort of grabbed them and then pushed them out of the way so they wouldn't smash on his feet. Now, there are a number of challenges with that. One is it doesn't seem to be consistent, again, with the language there, but it's also not consistent with our understanding of what happened there. And this is really odd for Rashbam, who's a Pashtan, someone who has a simple read. And he actually got this based on a midrash in a work known as Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. So what this tells us is that if a Pashtan, someone who reads a simple reading of the text, is going to these gymnastics to understand something, it must not be that simple to understand. So we have to go on now and try and find other possible reasons. So one of the another possible reason that doesn't have to bring in any midrash is Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, the German 20th century rabbi, or 1920th century rabbi. And what he suggests is when it said that the luchot, the tablets, were on Moshe's hands, they literally were on top of his hands, but he wasn't holding them. And then when he was ready to throw them down, he actually took hold of them and threw them down. And I suppose that works. It's a bit of a forced read, but not too much. And then we have a number of midrashic reads. For example, there's a work known as Avote Rabbi Natan, which is a midrashim that grow out of the Pirkei Avot, the wisdom of the fathers, and the Mishnah. And he suggests this beautiful midrash that the moment that Moshe saw the golden calf, he started to walk away or retreat almost in fear or anger, all of these, again, being overcome by emotion. But the elders of the people saw Moshe trying to get away from all this, and they ran to him, and for whatever reason, whether they said, "You can't take the Torah away from us," they tried to grab the luchot out of his hand, and there was a struggle, and Moshe won the struggle, and he grabbed the luchot back and smashed them. Now, there's nothing in the text that necessarily hints to us. However, Rashi, who often tries to do pshat, the simple reading, brings in midrash. But his explanation is when he brings in a midrash, it makes sense with the text. It answers a question and it flows. So whether or not this midrash actually happened, it kind of explains it and it works. If it had been written in the text, it wouldn't have been chopped up. It's a decent explanation, but it's still a midrash, and there are a few other midrashim that try and resolve this. But going back to one other very peculiar but also beautiful read, there was a 19th century German rabbi, Rabbi Yaakov Tzvi Mecklenburg, who wrote a work, Haktav Kabbalah, a commentary on the Torah. And what he does is something in between a pshat, a simple reading, using the tools and the text we have in front, and midrash. He looks at the word when it says va'etpos, and Moshe grabbed it, and he says, maybe it doesn't mean grabbed. Maybe it means something else. So what he does is he looks at the use of the word etpotz or tafas, which usually litfos means to grab something in another context in the book of Proverbs Mishle 39, where the author, we believe King Shlomo, is talking about a fear. He fears that if he becomes poor and loses his wealth, that he might turn to crime. And he says it beautifully. He says, ufen ivaresh, and perhaps, or lest I will become poor, veganafti, and I will steal, Vetafasti Shem Elokai. Now, does this mean literally Vetafasti and he will grab the name of God? No. The Peshat understanding, everyone knows what it means, is he will defile the name. By Moshe's actions of smashing the tablets and defiling them, the message he was giving to the people is, through your actions and your sins, you've caused this to happen. You essentially became unworthy to receive these luchot. So Moshe did not want to destroy them. It wasn't a matter of anger. It was a symbolic gesture. Their cruel deeds, the consequences of them worshiping that false idol, brings on the destruction of their covenant with God. And that's a much simpler message. Whether or not it's the literal meaning of it, it works beautifully. Is Moshe decided to destroy the tablets to show to the people, you destroyed them long before I did with your actions. And how many relationships and connections do we have in this world where something is destroyed and we think, oh, it's so horrible, and how could you do this to me? How could you do this? And we stop and think, wait a minute. I brought this on myself. I brought this on us long before the tablets were smashed. So we have to consider not only what's going to happen in the future, but when consequences happen to us, when bad things happen, some of it is out of our control. Sometimes bad things do happen. But oftentimes, when terrible things happen in this world, if we stop, we realize we brought this upon ourselves. We didn't just smash these tablets in one moment. We had a lot of actions that led up to it, which also means the only way to rebuild it and repair them is to think about what consequences our actions will have. And my goodness, if people could actually do this, it would be a very different world. And while we have to live with our brokenness and live with the consequences of our actions, the most important thing is that we learn from them. So what can you learn from your brokenness? How can you grow from your brokenness? So next time you deserve the luchot. You deserve powerful, meaningful relationships. Shabbat Shalom.